Welcome to Table for One. I'm the narrator, and in today's video, I'll be doing a rules refresher for Earthborne Rangers. In this video, I'm going to teach you what you need to know about taking tests and resolving challenge effects. So this is a big one. Let's get rolling. Alright, so I'm all set up to teach you about tests and challenge effects today. And before we get started, I've got a little good news and bad news. And fortunately for you, the bad news only applies to me. The bad news is that I shot this whole video a week and a half ago and just realized that the video file was corrupted. So I'm going to have to film this whole thing again. But the good news is you can benefit from that experience, and this will be my second time through, so hopefully it will be even better than the first. But if you'd like to help me feel better about that, don't forget to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with somebody else, or head over to my Ko-fi page, ko-fi, link in the description, where you can make a donation to the channel for as little as $1. That can be one time, or it could be recurring monthly, up to you. But it is always very appreciated, and thank you to everyone who has done that so far. But let's get going. We're going to be talking about tests and challenge effects today. Don't forget, I have chapter markers if you're looking to jump to something specific. I do have a few other videos in this series previously that you should have watched if you want this video to make any sense to you. So I've got a video where I talk about the different play areas. So the player area or ranger area versus within reach versus along the way versus the surroundings versus whatever we call it, where the challenge deck and the path deck are. If you're not familiar with those concepts, you'll definitely want to go watch that video first. And then I also had a video where I talked about card statuses. So things like cards being active versus in play versus ready versus exhausted. If you are not familiar with those concepts, you'll want to watch that video first as well. Otherwise, in an attempt to avoid anything spoilery, the only ranger cards that I'll be showing you, so the cards from my hand, are cards that you would have access to during the setup of the game. Some of them are from the Stewards of the Valley expansion, but they're all cards you would be able to see when you're setting up your ranger for the first time. And then as far as locations, weather, the path deck, it's all stuff that you would be able to see the first time you sit down to play. So it's just the woods path deck with the Lone Tree Station pivotal locations built in. So minimal spoilers in this video. But my intent is to start with some basic terms. Then we'll talk about where are tests, where do we take tests, what is interacting, how does fatigue interact with all of this? And then we'll go through the basics of actually taking the test itself, and then we'll talk about challenge effects at the end. And I am set up here with two rangers. These are the two rangers I play with. I've pulled any non-starting cards out of my ranger deck so I don't draw them. But these are the two rangers I use, so this is a two-ranger setup. You can, of course, play true solo. I like to play two-handed solo. I've talked about that a little bit already on this channel. And the way I've set it up this time, the aspect cards are here, and then I've put the energy tokens off to the side so you can see the numbers that would be beneath them. I've got my roll cards, my ranger decks, my discard pile and my fatigue stack are empty. Each ranger has an equipped gear just for demonstration purposes, and then each of them has a hand of cards which I've just laid out here so you can kind of see some important stuff. These are cards that you would be holding in your hand, right? The first weather card is here, so this is a perfect day. We've got 3 clouds on it because that's what it says to do when you set it up. So these are just 3 generic tokens. You might have the cardboard punch outs, which is fine. I've got the dice, it's just a little upgrade. And the location is Lone Tree Station. I have not put out a mission card, but potentially when you're playing, you're going to have 1 or more missions at any time. So that's sort of the lay of the land. Let's get into the key terms that we need to know before we really get started here. So first you need to be familiar with energy. So your energy you're going to find here on your aspect card. And the 4 types of energy, starting on the top left and going clockwise, are awareness, which is green, spirit, which is yellow, focus, which is blue, and fitness, which is red. So for each of those energy types, you're going to have some tokens. And again, you might have cardboard punch outs. I've got the wooden upgrades, but you're going to have a number of tokens. And when you start each round, you'll have the number that is listed on your aspect card. So this ranger here has 3 awareness, 2 spirit, 2 fitness, and 1 focus. And so they've got, that number of tokens for each type. So when we're talking about energy and energy tokens, we're talking about these tokens. And that's really important to know. So hopefully that's clear to you. Again, awareness, spirit, focus, and fitness. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is presence. So I'm going to grab a couple of cards from the top of the path deck here. We have this Prowling Wolhund and a Sitka Buck. And path cards, you'll notice in the top right corner, have this purple box, this purple square box with a number in it, a white number. So the Sitka Buck has a number 1. The Prowling Wolhund has a number 2. That is this card's presence. Now again, you will find that on path cards. You'll notice that these ranger cards here, whether it be the roll or our equipped gear or any of the cards in hand, none of them have that presence number in the top right corner. So your gear does not have presence. They've got numbers in the top left corner. That is a cost to play the card in those cases, but no presence on your own stuff. Presence is going to be something you find on path cards and a little bit different. You'll see it here in the bottom left of the location, but the locations are kind of a special case. We'll talk about that not right now. But presence will come into play later in this video. Just note that when I'm talking about presence, I'm talking about the number in the top right corner in this purple box, the white number on the path cards. So we'll take these two cards. We don't really need them right now. Put them on the bottom of the deck. Those were just for examples. And the next term I want to make sure you understand is fatigue. I'm going to have a section on fatigue later in this video, but let me go over the basics right now. So you've got your Ranger deck. At the beginning of every turn, you draw one card. Other game effects might allow you to draw cards into your hand. So each Ranger right now has 6 cards in their hand, and they've got 1 equipped gear. Your Ranger deck is always 30 cards. So if we subtract out the 6 and 1 from each of these, then we know we've got 23 cards left in each Ranger deck. So you draw 1 card at the beginning of each round. And if you ever need to draw a Ranger card and there are none left, you end your day. So this is kind of like a timer for your play session. Now, when you use a card, when you spend it one way or another, it goes into your discard pile. And for most purposes, that's kind of it. That card is done. There are some game effects that can interact with your discard pile, so that's not like 100%, but just generally think of it that way. Your Ranger deck, you're drawing cards, and then you can play them to do things. When the deck runs out, your play session's over. As you play your cards, they go into your discard pile, and they're more or less gone. You won't get them again until your next play session, the next day. But then we've also got this sideways stack here. This is your fatigue stack. So sometimes you can be fatigued. And when you are fatigued, this represents effort that you are expending to do things. So you would take the top card from your Ranger deck and place it face down without looking at it in your fatigue stack. And some things can fatigue you for multiple cards. You might be placing 2 or 3 cards. It might be a bunch of cards that you put in your fatigue stack. Your fatigue stack is sort of a limbo between your Ranger deck and your discard pile. So cards in your fatigue stack, there are some game effects that will allow you to take cards from your fatigue stack and add them directly into your hand. But there are other game effects that'll make you take your fatigue stack and put it into your discard pile. So as you're taking fatigue, because the cards are coming from your Ranger deck and going into your fatigue stack, it is decreasing your timer on your play session, on your day, because you're going to have fewer cards to draw from in your Ranger deck. So that's one element of it, because nothing ever goes back in the Ranger deck for the most part. I hesitate to say anything definitive in this game because there's always going to be some crazy card that's an exception. But broadly speaking, as you're putting cards from your Ranger deck into your fatigue stack, you are decreasing your timer on the rest of the day. But you could potentially get those cards back in your hand. They're not quite discarded yet. So that's what the fatigue stack is and kind of how fatigue functions broadly. We're going to talk more about how that interacts with testing later. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is testing thresholds. Let me grab this pat deck. Yeah, and this will work. So let me draw a card as an example. So this is a Lone Tree Station pivotal location card. This is topside mast. It's got this up arrow, so it comes into play along the way. It has 0 presence, and it has this test on it. We'll talk more about that in detail in a little bit, but we'll use this as an example. So this test is a convince test. It says focus plus connection. Again, we'll talk about what that means a little bit to do a convince test, and then the important part for right now is there's a number behind it in brackets. It says 3. That is the threshold you need to successfully complete the test. Now, we'll talk much more about that in detail later when we talk about actually taking tests and when we get into challenge effects. But Basically, every time you take a test, you're committing effort, and that's going to be in the form of your energy tokens as well as approach icons that are on your cards. Those are the two main sources, but there's other sources as well. So you're going to commit effort. And if at the end of your effort, at the end of the test, when we consider everything, if you've committed at least 3 effort, then you have passed this test. If you have committed less than 3 effort, then you fail the test. Now, let's compare that to this HydroLens goggles equipped gear that I have that also has a test on it. So this test needs awareness plus reason, and it's a clarify test. And this one does not have any bracketed number behind it. Whenever a test does not specify, when it has no bracketed number behind it, that means the default test value is 1. That means you must have at least 1 effort at the end of the test in order to successfully complete it. Otherwise, it is a failed test if you have 0 or less effort. And then finally, let me put this card on the screen and we'll bring this back later. These are your common tests. These are always available. And you'll notice 3 of these. So we've got this fitness plus exploration. That's a traverse test. It has a bracket after it with an X in it. Same here, the connect test is spirit plus connection for the connect test, a bracket with an X. And then this bottom one is an avoid test, awareness plus conflict with a bracketed X. So if you've got even a glancing familiarity with algebra, that X is standing for a variable. So in the case of all these common tests, X is equal to the presence of the card with which you are interacting. And then it says to a minimum of 1. So if we look at topside mast here that we drew, this card has a presence of 0. So if we wanted to do for whatever reason, a traverse test on topside mast, which I suppose you could, the minimum effort you need is X, where X is the card's presence. This card's presence is 0, but to a minimum of 1. So you would need at least 1 effort at the end of the test in order to successfully complete it. Otherwise, the test is a failure. So those are the 3 types of test thresholds you will see in this game. Either a specific number, such as 3, nothing specific listed, which is always a default of 1 unless there's some sort of other modifier at play, or an X, some sort of variable, which is frequently the presence of the card that you're interacting with, but not necessarily. But in those cases, just read the card, it'll tell you what the variable is. Now let's talk about failing a test. Generally, you're trying to succeed when we have a test. There may be some odd cases where that's not what you want, but generally you're trying to succeed when you take a test. And when you succeed, then you follow the directions on the card for what happens when you succeed. When you fail the test, in almost all cases, nothing happens. There is no penalty except for the wasted effort that you put into it. So perhaps some of these energy tokens are wasted because they're spent and they only get refilled once per round. Or if you committed any of your cards to the test, which again, we'll talk about how that works in a bit, but if you committed any cards, they get discarded and you failed the test, so the card is just gone. But in some specific cases, there will be some sort of negative consequence for failure, so you'll want to take that into account before you choose to take a test. That'll always be listed on the card, so just read the card. And the most frequent and important example of that is, again, one of these common tests, this traverse test, which says you add progress to a location or feature equal to your effort, and if you fail, you suffer 1 injury. So an injury is just you place 1 harm token on your roll. So with the dice I have here, you would do that like so. An injury is just harm on your roll card. Now, that's bad for a couple reasons. 1, if you suffer 3 injuries, your day is immediately over. So that's the end of your play session. It's not a good thing. There's some perhaps lingering penalties for that. In addition, every time you take an injury, your entire fatigue stack immediately goes into your discard pile. So that can be quite devastating. So if you're going to take this traverse test, which you are going to be taking often, and it is one of the most common tests in the game, you want to consider that if you fail, you have to take 1 injury. So you definitely want to try and pass that test. I think those are all the key terms we need to talk about. I'm going to draw a couple more path cards here and just put them into play. We've got a Sit Godot here, and we've got the Prowling Woolhund here within reach of this ranger. So we'll just leave those out for now as a couple of examples. And let's get into the first big section, which is where are these tests that we're taking? So I'll bring this card back out again now. I'll probably just leave it here. These are the common tests. This is like one of the player aid cards. There should be 1 for each player. And it's a really good idea to keep one of these within visibility of every player at the table at all times, because it's just super useful. So these tests, traverse, connect, remember, and avoid, are always available. These are called the common tests because they're really common. You're going to be using them all the time, and they're available to you regardless of what cards are out on the table, what's in play. Sort of always have the choice to take these common tests. So these are available, and you'll notice that each one says in bold words, and they're color coded: fit, SPI, FOC, and AWA. That corresponds to your energy type. So your fitness, spirit, focus, and awareness. So we're going to come back to that more in a little bit, but you'll notice that across all tests, not just the common tests. So you've got your common tests here. Other places, that's sort of ethereal. Other places you'll find tests are on path cards. So topside mast here has this convince test, which has focus energy. You can see FOC in bold blue there. The Sitka Doe has shoe, which uses spirit, SPI in yellow. Basically, anytime you see one of the energy tokens called out with its 3-letter abbreviation in bold and all caps when it's color coded, that is telling you this is a test you can take. So we've got our common tests. You can see tests on many of the path cards. Sometimes you will find tests on the weather card. There's not one in this case, but sometimes you'll find them there. Locations will frequently have tests. So you can see the Lone Tree Station has this search test that uses awareness energy. And sometimes missions may have tests on them too. So just be aware that those are 3 other areas where you might find tests outside of path cards and the common tests. And finally, you might see tests on your ranger cards. So for example, these HydroLens goggles have this clarify test that uses awareness energy. Most of the tests on your ranger cards you're going to find on your equipped gear, but there are rare instances where you may find them on moment cards. So there are no cards in my decks that are moments that this would apply to, but from the starting cards, if you were to play as a shaper, let's pretend I'm a shaper for a second, you might have access then to this moment card, Sky Whip, which you must have 2 awareness to gain this card. It has 0 cost. Moments are, as is implied by the name, they're momentary. It's like a thing you play, usually in response to something. Now, again, this one's for a shaper. I don't recommend shapers for your first playthrough. You got to be maybe a little bit more experienced before you want to play a shaper. I would recommend, especially if you're new to this type of card game. But hey, you do you. But shaper cards are manifestations. We're going to ignore that for a second. The point is, this is a moment card. It has 0 cost, and so you can choose to play this card, and when you play it, it has this test on it, and so you can do this strike test. It's going to use awareness and conflict, and then when the test is over, your moment card gets discarded. So there may be other moment cards out there, other types of cards that would have tests on them, but most of the ranger cards with tests are going to be your gear. That is the most common type. So let's get rid of this shaper and their wild moment card. And so as a quick reminder, there are only 3 things you can do on your turn. You can rest, which means you're kind of done for the round. You can play a card, so you can like put a gear into play or play a moment card, something like that. Or you can take a test. In that last example of that Shaper's moment card, you're playing a moment card and taking a test. You kind of get to do both because the moment lets you take a test, but unusual example. So you're just doing, really, if you're not passing, you're playing a card or you're taking a test. So tests are a huge part of playing Earthborne Rangers, like the main part of the gameplay loop. And now we know that the tests can be on your ranger cards, on the path cards, on the location or the weather, potentially missions, and then you have your common tests that are always available. So the next thing we need to talk about is interacting. This is a term that is not super well defined in the rulebook, and it can lead to some questions. So broadly speaking, interacting with a card just means you are taking a test on that card. So if I take the shoe test on the Sitka Doe, I'm interacting with the Sitka Doe. If I take the convince test on topside mast, I am interacting with topside mast. Now let me take a look at my hand here. Yeah, I've got this carbon forged trowel. Let's put that into play too for a second. If I've got this gear here, this gear has a couple of tests on it, and these tests affect other cards. So if we look at this bottom one that uses fitness, this is a strike test, and it says that it allows you to add harm to a being for every 2 effort. So if I chose to do that test on this card and try and harm this being, this prowling woolhund, because I am, even though the test is here, because I'm primarily interacting with, or because I'm primarily affecting this card, we would say I'm interacting with this card, with the prowling woolhund. Now, interacting is important for the next point, which is fatigue. So we talked about the very basics of fatigue at the top of this video, but when you interact with a card, all cards between you and that card are going to fatigue you. So, broadly speaking, you, I'm putting that in quotes here, you is everything that's in your player area, in your ranger area. So, your cards are in your hand, your ranger deck, your discard, your fatigue, these are part of your player area. Your role, your aspects, and your energy tokens are part of your player area. And even your equipped gear, this is part of your player area. So, unless you're getting into some more advanced exceptions, all of this stuff is you. You're not going to be fatigued by your own stuff. So let's say that this ranger wants to perform this shoe test on the Sitka doe. Everything between the ranger and the Sitka doe will fatigue the ranger, and there is nothing between us. But let's say now that instead we want to perform this convince test on topside mast. Before I execute that test, everything between me and topside mast will then fatigue this ranger. So in that case, that's going to be the Sitka doe. Everything within reach is between the ranger and what's along the way. So when you get fatigued, you look at this presence number in the top right corner of the path card, which is a 1. That's how much the card fatigues you. So you would take one card from the top of your ranger deck and put it in your fatigue stack before you can then take this convince test on topside mast. So let's look at another example. Let's say this ranger here on the right also wants to take the convince test on topside mast. All cards between this ranger and topside mast are going to fatigue them. So that's going to be their own within reach area. This is this prowling woolhund, which has 2 presence. So taking that test would fatigue this ranger for 2 cards, all right? Now we'll go back to the ranger on the left. Let's say they want to take this search test on Lone Tree Station. Well, everything between this ranger and Lone Tree Station is going to be everything within reach of themselves, and then everything along the way. So they're going to be fatigued for 1 from the Sitka doe, 0 from topside mast, because that one has 0 presence. So that's kind of nice. You can interact past it and it's not really going to fatigue you. So again, in this case, to take this search test on Lone Tree Station, the only presence between this ranger and that test is the Sitka doe. So that would be 1 fatigue for this ranger. Now, when we say between, remember that you have your own player area and then your own within reach. And then just think of it kind of like a forking path from your own within reach. From there, you can either go to along the way or to any other rangers within reach. So let's say this ranger on the right wants to do this shoe test on this Sitka doe. Everything between the Sitka doe and this ranger will fatigue them, which will be, again, their own within reach. So they would take 2 fatigue from this prowling woolhund. But along the way, even if this had a positive number on topside mast, this would not fatigue them because the other within reach, they don't have to go along the way and then kind of come back down. They go within reach and then go sideways. Now let me draw a couple more path cards to give you some more examples here. So here is Cordo, who is a ranger veteran. Again, this is one of the humans that you'll find at Lone Tree Station. And then over here we have a Sunbury Bramble. So 2 more cards within reach. Now, if this ranger on the left wants to take this convince test on topside mast, everything between them and the test, the card they're interacting with, would fatigue them. So the Sitka doe has 1 presence. Cordo has 2 presence, but he does have this keyword friendly on him. Anything that has the keyword friendly, you do not suffer fatigue when you interact beyond that card. So even though there is a 2, you do not suffer 2 fatigue. So in total, this ranger taking this test on topside mast would only suffer the 1 fatigue from the Sitka doe, none from this friendly human. Now, this ranger on the right in this example, I think we kind of get it with topside mast. If they wanted to take a test up there, they would suffer 2 fatigue from the prowling woolhund plus 1 from the Sunbury Bramble, so 3 fatigue in total before they could take that convince test. But you'll also notice that Sunbury Bramble has this awareness test on it for pluck with a minimum threshold of 2 to successfully complete the test. So if this ranger wanted to take this awareness test, they would suffer fatigue for every card or for all presence between the Sunbury Bramble and the ranger. And there are no cards in between. This prowling woolhund is adjacent, like anything else within reach is not between. So this ranger could take this pluck test without suffering any fatigue. You don't have to worry about this other card that's in the same area. That won't fatigue you. Now, in the somewhat unusual event that you are taking a test on a card that is like either from your gear or from a moment card, and it is interacting with multiple cards that are in play at the same time, so maybe something within reach as well as something along the way, you do not take fatigue from cards multiple times. What you do is you select the card that you are interacting with that is furthest away from you, so the card that is along the way, and then suffer fatigue as if you were interacting with only that card, and that is all the fatigue you need to suffer during that test. You do not suffer fatigue multiple times for every card that you happen to be adding tokens to. That's not a very common effect, but it can come up, so that's how you resolve it in that case. Now, something else important to note in the last video that I did where I talked about card statuses, cards can be made exhausted. You know what, we'll leave that one up. Let's exhaust this card here so that it's turned sideways. Two things to know about exhausted cards. One, if an exhausted card has a test on it, you may still perform that test at any time. Tests on cards are always available regardless of whether the card is ready or if it is exhausted. The second thing to know is that exhausted cards do not fatigue you. So at this point, if this ranger on the right wanted to take this convince test on topside mast, they would only suffer 2 fatigue, not 3, because the Sunbury Bramble, even though it has 1 presence, it is exhausted. So that won't fatigue you anymore. Now, I'll leave that one exhausted for now. We're going to need another example of that later when we're talking about challenge effects. But I think that's what we need to know about both the word interacting and about fatigue and taking tests. So now we can get into the basics of taking the test itself. So let's pick a test to take. We'll take this ranger on the right is going to take a common test, but any test on the table would be available to them, whether it's in somebody else's within reach, like the shoe test on the Sitka Doe or the hunt test on Cordo. Whether it's along the way, like the convince test on topside mast, if it's the location, such as the search test on Lone Tree Station. There could be tests again on weather or missions, and then their own within reach area. So there is this pluck test on Sunbury Bramble. Even though it's exhausted, the test is available. And then there are tests on your equipped gear or perhaps in your cards, such as this clarified test on the HydroLens goggles. And then, of course, there are the common tests as well. Let's pick a common test. Let's take this avoid test. So this is, you need awareness plus conflict. And the threshold is X, where X is the presence of the card with which you are interacting, minimum of 1. It means a minimum threshold of 1, not that the card needs to have at least 1 presence. So you could take one of these tests, such as the traverse test, which has an X. You could take that on topside mast, even though it has 0 presence, but you just ignore that the presence is 0, and to complete the test successfully, you need a minimum of 1 energy or 1 effort committed. So again, let's practice taking this avoid test on this prowling woolhound. So the threshold is an X, so we're going to need at least 2 committed effort in order to successfully complete this test. And if the test is successful, we can exhaust this being. So that means we could turn it sideways, and now we wouldn't have to worry about it fatiguing us if we want to interact with something beyond it. So to take the test, the first requirement is you look at what is the energy type. This one is awareness. To take the test, you must commit at least 1 of the matching energy type using one of your energy tokens. If I had no awareness tokens, if I had already spent them, I would not have access to any of the awareness tests. So avoid or pluck on the Sunbury Bramble or search on Lone Tree Station. You must commit at least 1 token of the matching energy type in order to take the test. So my commitment to the test is now 1 effort. And again, we need 2 on this avoid test in order to be successful. So right now we would fail the test. I could choose to now add additional energy tokens of that type to increase my effort. So right now my effort is up to 3 energy and I need only 2. So that might be a bit much, right? Let's take it back down to 2 for a second. Now you may never use other energy types. You have to use the type that is being called for, and only the type that is being called for in the test. So here we're committing to awareness. The next thing you can do is, you may have noticed, each test besides the energy type listed has some sort of icon behind it. That is the approach icon. And so you'll notice on your Ranger cards, you've got approach icons on your cards. There are 4 approach icons. They're exploration, connection, reason, and conflict. And so when you're taking the test, in addition to committing at least 1 energy token of the matching type, you may play cards with the matching icon on it, the matching approach icons, to add additional effort. So in this case, this ranger, if you look at the cards in their hand, does not have the conflict icon anywhere. So they don't have any cards they could play. And generally speaking, unless modified somehow, when any ranger is taking a test, only that ranger is taking the test. Other rangers, like this ranger here, has some conflict icons in their hand. They could not throw down a card. They could not commit energy to this test. It's solely the ranger who is taking the test who is committing the effort here. So they don't have any conflict icons to add to that. But if they did, each icon that they put down would add one more effort. So you can boost this up a little bit. So that's sort of the interesting conflict in this game is that, do I want to hold on to this gear so that I can play it and equip it, or do I just want to use it for the approach icon? Because once you've played it for the icon, let's just pretend this card was in this ranger's hand. If they played well, that's the wrong one, huh? Let's pretend this one was in their hand. If they played this card and to use this approach icon for conflict, that gets our committed effort up to 3, and we need 2, which is good. That's more than enough. But after the test is over, regardless of if you pass or fail the test, any cards that you played for their approach icons go into your discard pile. So now the card's gone. That means I cannot later play the card for the cool effect that it has. So that's again part of the choices you have to make in the game is, do you want to use your cards for their effects, or do you want to use them for their approach icons? So there is one more component that could be involved in a test, and these are your ranger tokens. I'll give an example of that after this one. But the last thing that happens after you've committed all the effort you want to commit between your energy tokens and your approach icons, the last thing you do is you draw a challenge card. And I'm going to draw a few challenge cards here. And let's just look at the focus piece of this, for example. So normally you're going to look at whichever energy type relates to the test you are taking. Let me give you a little more space on these so they're easier to see. But let's just look at focus on the blue one for a second. So you can see the value that you get could add 1 to whatever you've done, could be 0, could be -1, or could be -2. So this number is going to modify whatever effort you've committed. So in this case, I've committed 2 effort here. I didn't play any other cards. If I draw a green card, this would make my effort 3. This would leave it at 2. And this would bring me from 2 down to 1. So that could be the difference between passing or failing the test, because again, I need 2 in order to pass this avoid test, and I've only committed 2. So if I get a 0 or a +1, then I'll pass. If I get a -1, or if I happen to draw a -2, then I will fail the test. So you never know what that number is going to be. So sometimes you're going to want to commit more effort than the test strictly calls for, because you could draw a -1 or a -2. I think I've talked about this elsewhere. Strategically, if you just always plan to get a -1, then you'll be in really good shape for the most part. If you take a test and you need to draw at least 0, that's a little bit risky. You're taking kind of a risk now. And if you take a test and you're going to fail it unless you draw a +1, like chances are you are going to fail that. You should not rely on getting a +1. And if the results would be really catastrophic if you failed, and failure would be caused by a -2, then you might commit a lot of extra effort just to make sure that you pass, or you're guaranteed. And one example is if you're taking this traverse test, remember, if you fail, you suffer 1 injury. And when you suffer an injury, you lose your whole fatigue stack. So if your fatigue stack is super high, or say you've already got 2 injuries and one more would cause you to have to end the day early, then you really just don't want to take that risk. The risk is too high. So commit at least 2 more effort than you need to pass the test. Now, of the 24 cards in this challenge deck, there is a -2, only a single card with a -2 for each of the aspects, so each of the energy types. So there's only one -2 focus, only one -2 fitness, only one -2 awareness, and only a single -2 spirit. And they are all separate cards, but also each of them has this symbol in the bottom right corner. This is a shuffle symbol. So normally at the end of the test, you draw your challenge card, you add the modifier to whatever effort you committed, then you either pass the test or fail the test. And then normally you take the card and you just put it in the challenge deck discard. But if it had a -2 on it, it's going to have this shuffle symbol on it. So even though we're doing an awareness test, if we drew this card, this would give us +1 awareness, which would be a total 3 effort. We would pass the test. It still has this icon on it. Anytime you see that shuffle icon, you take your entire challenge deck discard, including that -2 card, and you shuffle the whole challenge deck and make a new challenge deck. So what that means is, of that 24 card deck, you can always draw a -2, no matter what test you are taking. There's always a possibility of a -2. So it's not necessarily a very large chance, but the chance is always there. So it's a little bit scary. Now let's say that I drew this card. So I got 2 plus 1. That was 3 effort. That's a success for my avoid test. So this Prowling Woolhand would be exhausted. This energy would be spent, and you get energy back at the beginning of each round. Now, let's say for a second, let's say it's this ranger's turn again. We come, this ranger did something else. We come back to this ranger. This one wants to take this convince test on topside mast. So if we take that test now, we must commit at least 1 focus energy, and we have exactly 1. So let's commit that. And then this convince test is modified by connection icons on approach cards. And I've got a few of those in hand. So I've already got 1 Hydra Lens goggle in play. You can't, or I'm not going to put down another one. So we can use that heart. I've got a couple other cards here with hearts on them, connection icons. Let's use those. So that gets my effort up to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, before I can even complete the test, first I have to suffer fatigue. There are 2 cards between where this ranger is and where I am interacting on topside mast. They're Sunbury Bramble and Prowling Woolhand, but they are both exhausted, so I don't have to suffer any fatigue from these 2 cards now. And if this test succeeds, then you'll say what you'll see here on the card. It says to move your ranger token to this card. So if you're playing with cardboard punch-outs, the ranger token is the token that you have on your roll that kind of looks like this symbol on the back of the ranger card, this sort of opening up, sort of diamondy flower, it kind of looks like. Or I've got these meeple tokens that I've got. These are extras, but so this says I've passed the test, right? Let's assume I passed the test. Move my ranger token to this card. So let's go ahead and do that. I discard the energy. I discard the cards that I committed. And then whatever challenge card that came up, I'm going to resolve all those challenge effects. I'll talk about that in a moment. I discard the challenge card. One other thing I wanted to show you was now let's go back to this ranger. Let's have them take that same convince test on topside mast here. So first, in order to do that, cards between this ranger and the card we're interacting with, topside mast, are going to fatigue you. The Sitka Doe would fatigue this ranger 1. Cordo has a presence of 2, but is friendly, so we are not fatigued by Cordo. So now we can take the test. We need to commit at least 1 focus energy, and let's commit a second. And maybe we even use one of these cards for its approach icon. We'll do this one. So it's the heart, the connection icon, which is what we need. That matches. So that is 3 approach, that is 3 committed effort. Also, if there is another ranger token on that card, that also gives you 1 effort. And if you're playing a 3 or 4 ranger game, if there are multiple ranger tokens here, each of those ranger tokens will add 1 effort. So I've got 1, 2, 3 plus 1 for this other ranger's token on there. Now, your own ranger token will not do that. Only other rangers tokens will do that. So that is the last primary source of committed effort that I wanted to tell you about. So you can commit effort with your own energy tokens from the approach icons on your cards, and then you get 1 for free for each ranger token on the card you were interacting with. So 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, we need 3. So that way when we draw our path card, even if it's a -1, we should be fine. Or so our challenge card. Sorry. So let's say we draw this challenge card. It's a 0. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 effort, so we pass the test. All right. Now, you may have noticed as well. Let's just put this here. You're taking the test and you're trying to pass it, and you reveal your challenge card, add in the modifier, your test. You may have succeeded, you may have failed. In either case, you immediately resolve the effects. But then on these challenge cards at the bottom are these 3 banners. So this sort of yellowish one that has the sun on it, this bluish one with a mountain, and this red one with a crest on it. After you have fully resolved the test, the next thing you need to do is resolve all of the challenge effects. So whichever card you drew, so that was the last one I got, right? That was blue. I would then start with my surroundings and then go along the way and then go within reach. And I would activate anything with that matching symbol. So this weather card is a blue symbol. So I would activate that first. If the location had anything, that would come into play. If I had any active missions, I would activate that. Then anything along the way, that would activate. Anything within reach of me. So Sitka Doe has a blue banner here, so we would activate whatever that effect is. If there was anything in my ranger area, that would activate as well. So this is where the cards are all going to start interacting with each other and the world's really going to come alive. Now this is going to be pretty critical, so hopefully you did watch that previous video on card status. When you activate these challenge card effects, after you've drawn the card and resolved your test effect, it is going to activate on all active cards with the matching symbol. So what is an active card? An active card is in play and it is ready. So exhausted cards with challenge effects, you do not resolve those. These are not active because they are exhausted. So you need a ready card that's in play, and it must be in the surroundings, along the way, in your own within reach, or in your own ranger area or player area. And then there's one caveat. It can be within reach of another ranger if the card you are interacting with is within reach of another ranger. So let's do this for a second. Let's make this active. Let's say this ranger on the right took this shoe test on this Sitka Doe for some reason. And so when they took that test, first they would suffer fatigue, for any cards between this ranger and the card they're interacting with. So that is going to be their own within reach is in between those two. So they would take 2 fatigue for this prowling woolhind, no fatigue for the sunbury bramble because that is already exhausted. Then they would take the test. So they're going to commit their energy of the matching type, play any cards with approach icons that they want to play, and then draw a challenge card. Then they're going to use the modifier from the challenge card and either resolve the test or they failed the test. If there's a penalty, suffer the penalty, and then activate all active cards with the matching icon. So let's say for a second that we drew this card. So we have this sun icon. Again, you're going to start furthest away. So you're going to start with the surroundings. You go weather, location, and missions. You activate those in order. We didn't have any sun icons there in this example. Then anything along the way with sun icons we don't have. Then we go to within reach. And in this case, we're interacting with a card in another ranger's within reach. And we've got a sun icon there. And we've also got a sun icon in our own within reach. So what you do in this instance is you choose which of the within reaches you want to resolve first, and then resolve all cards in that within reach area before you go to the other within reach area and then resolve all of those. So we could start with our own, and we would have ready another prowling woolhind. So if there was another prowling woolhind and it was exhausted, we would ready it. And there are no other effects here. And then we would go to the other within reach area. This one says, on the Sitka Doe, if there are one or more Sitka bucks in play, and there are not. And then there's this double arrow. The double arrow, everything after that, you only resolve if you were fully able to resolve the first part. So if there are one or more Sitka bucks in play, move each Sitka buck within reach. So there are no other Sitka bucks, so we don't do the second part because we can't do the first part. All right, so let's run that same scenario again where this ranger is performing a test in this ranger's within reach. But let's say this time, we've suffered our fatigue, we've spent our energy tokens, we've committed any approach icons that we wanted to. We draw our challenge card, we resolve the effects of the test, either the failure or the success, discard any cards that we used for approach icons, get rid of our energy tokens, and then let's say that the challenge effect icon was blue this time. It was this blue mountain one. Then again, we resolve any blue challenge effects, any mountain challenge effects, first on the weather where there is one, then the location, then any missions, then along the way. Then we choose either our own within reach or the within reach that we're interacting with, and we resolve all of the mountain blue challenge effects in that within reach area. And then we go to the other within reach area that we did not choose, resolve all those matching effects as well. So in this case, on the Sitka Doe, it says, if there's an active predator, exhaust it. Well, there is. This prowling woolhind has the predator tag, and it is active. Because it's in our own within reach and it is ready. So we do exhaust it now. And then because we were able to complete the first half before these double arrows, we now read the second half and resolve that as well. And that says add damage to this being equal to that predator's presence. This predator has a presence of 2, so we would add 2 damage to this Sitka Doe. Now let's run that back And instead, let's say it looked like this, but now this ranger on the left is performing, let's say, a test with Cordo. We don't care what the test is. Still, they commit the effort. They commit at least one energy of the matching type, any cards that they want to play. They draw their challenge effect, resolve the test either with success or a failure, and then discard any spent energy tokens and any used cards in your discard pile. And now again, let's say that we had this blue icon and we need to resolve it. We would still go through weather, location, missions along the way like we did before. And we're only interacting with our own within reach in this case, not this within reach over here. So we only resolve the challenge effects in our own within reach. And again, we're pretending that we drew blue. We drew this mountain. So the Sit Godot, it says, if there is an active predator, exhaust it. Well, now there is not an active predator. Even though there is a ready predator in this within reach area, it is not active. Again, active means that it is in the surroundings along the way or your own within reach, and it is ready. And the special case is another ranger's within reach is active if and only if you are interacting with a card in that area. But we are not. We said we were interacting with Cordo. We took a test with Cordo. So because we did not interact with this within reach area, even though there is a ready predator here, there is no active predator in the areas that we're interacting with. So in that case, we cannot resolve the first half of this challenge effect, and then we ignore everything after the double arrows. All right, so one more quick note about challenge effects before we wrap up here, and that is some challenge effects may cause cards to move around on the table and move between areas. So they may move between your within reach and along the way, or vice versa, or between multiple different within reach areas between rangers. And so the first thing to know about that is that each card can only have its challenge effect activated one time per test. So let's say there's a card that is along the way and its challenge effect tells you to move it, and then you move it to within reach. Then later, when you go to activate all the challenge effects within reach, do not activate that card again because you have already resolved that challenge effect. Now, the second thing to know is that you must resolve each area when you're doing challenge effects fully, all the cards that are in that area before you move on to the next area. So let's say, for example, you're resolving along the way and one of the challenge effects tells you to add a card from the path deck or to move a card from within reach to along the way. If that card that is now along the way also has a challenge icon that matches the current challenge card, then you need to resolve that effect before you move on to another area such as within reach. So those sorts of things don't happen super often, but they happen often enough that I've seen the question come up a few times online, so I thought I should address it here. So I know that was kind of a lot. Hopefully it was helpful and that made sense. If you have questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to try and help you out there. Tests are just a critical part of playing Earthborne Rangers, but they're a little bit confusing. They kind of overlap with a lot of other systems, so I know it's a lot to take in. Again, don't forget, I've got chapter markers. If there's a part you need to rewatch, feel free to go back and do that. Hopefully this is clear though. And if you did find it useful, again, please leave a like on the video so that I know. Share it with somebody else. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so yet. I'm going to have a lot more Earthborne Rangers rules videos like this over the next several weeks. So if you don't want to miss them, make sure you're subscribed. And don't forget about my coffee page as well. That is always open. But that's what I've got for you this time on Table for One. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helped, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy.